At 16, I had an asthma attack and passed out. Dad was home. My brother said he's just faking for attention. Dad believed him. A neighbor called 911 and I almost died. Years later, Dad had a heart attack and he called me. I've had asthma since I was 9. Not the mild kind where you cough a little and use an inhaler. The kind where your throat closes and your lungs stop working and you end up in the ER with a tube down your throat. My older brother Troy knew this. He'd seen me hospitalized twice. He just didn't care. Troy was 2 years older and had spent his whole life convincing my dad that everything I did was for attention. If I got hurt, Troy said I was faking. If I got sick, Troy said I was exaggerating. If I cried, Troy told Dad I was doing it for sympathy. And Dad believed every word because Troy was the firstborn, the athlete, the one who looked just like him. I was the skinny kid with bad lungs who couldn't play football. When I was 16, I was home with Dad and Troy on a Saturday afternoon. My chest had been tight all morning. My inhaler was almost empty, and I'd told Dad 3 times that week I needed a new prescription. He kept saying he'd get to it. That afternoon, it hit hard. I was in the hallway getting water when my chest locked up. I couldn't breathe. I grabbed the counter and tried to call out, but nothing came. I fumbled for my inhaler and got one weak puff that did almost nothing. I stumbled into the living room where Dad and Troy were watching a game. I was wheezing so loud it sounded like a broken whistle. Dad looked up. Troy looked at me and rolled his eyes. Here we go again. Dad, he's doing his thing. Wants attention. My father looked at me, looked at Troy, and sat back down. He'll be fine. He always does this when he wants something. I dropped to my knees. My vision was going gray at the edges. I couldn't get a single full breath in. I reached for my dad's arm and he pulled away. Stop it. You're embarrassing yourself. I passed out on the living room floor, face down on the carpet, not breathing. Troy stepped over me to get a drink from the other room. Dad turned the volume up on the TV. Our neighbor Linda was walking her dog past the front window. She saw me through the glass lying on the floor with my face turning blue. She banged on the door. When Dad opened it, she started screaming. Your son is on the floor and he's not breathing. Why aren't you calling 911? Dad looked back at me and something in him shifted. Troy yelled from the other room. He's faking Linda. He does this all the time. Linda pushed past my dad and called 911 herself. I was unconscious for 7 minutes. The paramedics said another 2 minutes and I would have had brain damage or worse. They intubated me in the ambulance. I woke up in the hospital with my mother standing over me. She and Dad were separated and she'd driven 2 hours the second the hospital called. She was shaking. She looked at my father with something I'd never seen from her before. You almost let our son die because your other son told you he was faking? Dad couldn't look at her. Troy wasn't even at the hospital. He stayed home to finish the game. I spent 3 days in the ICU. When I got home, Dad tried to act normal. He made soup and sat by my bed. I didn't speak to him. Not that day, not the next, not for weeks. When I finally did, all I said was, I needed a new inhaler. He drove to the pharmacy in 10 minutes. The damage was done though. I moved in with my mom at 17 and barely spoke to Dad or Troy the rest of high school. I went to college, got a job, built a life in a different state. Troy stayed close to Dad. They were a team, always had been. 12 years later, I got a phone call at work on a Tuesday morning. It was Dad. His voice was wrong, thin, scared, barely there. Son, I'm having chest pains. I think it's my heart. I can't reach Troy. I need you to call me an ambulance. I sat at my desk, phone to my ear, listening to my father struggling to breathe. The sound was familiar. I'd made that exact sound on his living room floor while he turned up the TV. Where's Troy? I asked. He's not answering. Please. I can't. I need help. Call 911 yourself, Dad. I can't. I called you from the house phone. My cell is in the car. I need you to call for me. I sat there for a long time. He was wheezing. I could hear it getting worse. I picked up my office phone and called 911 to his address. Gave them his information. Told them it sounded cardiac. Told them the front door was probably unlocked. Then I hung up. Dad called back from the ambulance 20 minutes later. They say I'm having a heart attack. They're taking me to the hospital. Are you coming? Is Troy there yet? He's meeting me at the hospital. Then you're covered, I said. Son, please. I was wrong about that day. I know I was wrong. I know, I said. You were. I hung up. He survived. Triple bypass. 6 weeks of recovery. Troy posted about it online. Called himself Dad's Rock through the whole thing. Mom asked me if I was going to visit. I told her I already did everything I needed to do. I called the ambulance. That's more than he did for me.